All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott from Jeff Teaches Programming. In the last video I made, I was coming in here and attempting to make some changes to the BMI program so that I was able to come in and do, so that I was able to go in and do some work and basically create, for lack of better words, kind of easier to use functions that could be shared. All right, so what I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to come into my validation both here, and I'm going to look at what I've got. I've got an is there input. Those are the ones I used a long time ago. So let's go down to the bottom here, and I've got on the bottom, oh, where are you? Well, I'll just write these right here. How's that? And it's going to be pretty simple. I'm going to write two functions here, and both of them are going to be fairly simplistic. The first one will be public bool. In fact, we're going to pass a couple. We're going to come in here and we're going to return a couple things. A Boolean that we'll call I don't know, is valid. You should start your Booleans with is, or typically they are. And a string, which we'll just call message. All right. And this will be ValidateRequiredString. Okay. And we will pass into that, don't worry, it'll get fixed in just a minute, a string, which will be some kind of input, and another string, which will be our field name. So we might as well call that field name. Now, I'm getting this error because, of course, I'm not returning anything right now. All right, so just for now, I'm going to, since it's going to be it's such a small function, I'm just going to say if, come on, oh good gosh, if string dot is null or white space input. So what do I know? All right, basically what I know here is if we did come in and leave this blank, okay, I'm just going to return both false and a message. We might as well, let's be good here, and we'll say, what do we call it? Just field name. Field name is required. How's that? Just do it something like that. That's going to be almost it. All right. Otherwise, okay, otherwise it worked. So we'll just return true, and there's nothing else to return. Like that. That's it. All right, so let's write a little comment here so we know what's going on. Check for blank input. If input indeed is blank, return false and error message. If input is not blank, I don't like blank, let's make it empty. If it's not empty, return true and no error message. And I don't really think I need much more comment than that, because it pretty much says everything that we're doing here. All right, so that's the first one. All right, and we're going to make another one here. So I'm going to copy this much of it here. I could probably copy more, but that's okay. I'm going to get an error because that already exists, so don't worry. Here I'm going to call it ValidateRequiredNumeric. Like that. All right, it's still giving me an error because I don't have anything. All right, so what do we want to do here? Well, just like before, we can do this. And just like before, we can have both of these. We can have this. We can have our field name, but we have to also add to this a minimum and a maximum. So int min and int max, because we're going to be doing range checking too. All right, so let's grab this to begin with, because we do want to, we do want to do the same thing here. Come on, there we go. So if it's empty, we want to return that it's required, just like before. All right. So we'll return false and that the field name is required. Okay, that's so far. If we get down to here, so check for, again, empty input. All right. If input is not empty, we're going to change that because we're not done yet. Okay, so that's the first thing. If we get down to here, something was input. All right, so we're going to do another if statement. And I'm going to say if not int.tryParse. And what are we going to be trying here? Well, input. And we want to take the result. We'll just call it value. We can call it whatever, of course, we want to call it. All right? So something was inputted. Verify that it is or is not an integer. All right, so if it's not an integer, what do we want to do? We again want to return false. So we can grab this. We'll change the message here. All right, not that it's required, but we'll say field name must be an integer. All right. So if we get down to here, an integer was inputted, so we want to verify that it is or is not within the associated range. All right, so we're going to do this again, but now what we want to do is we want to do a little bit of different checks. So we're going to say if value is less than min or value is greater than max, all right, then it's out of range. So we will again give an error message. All right, and we'll say must be between min and max. Okay. Finally, if we get down to the bottom, valid integer inputted. Return true and no error message. So just return true and no error message. All right. That should be it. All right. So what have we done here? Let's take a quick look. As it says, first we're checking for no input whatsoever. That's really all we're doing in this routine. So if it is empty, so let's say, for example, it's the first name, and we left the first name empty. It should come back and say first name is required. But if we did put something in there, it's going to return true and no error message. So this is the value of is valid. So here it's false because indeed it was empty. Here it's true. All right. So we could not validate it here, and here we could. So this is an error message, and here we don't have an error message, so we just put in that. All right. Now we start again by checking for empty input. If it's empty, we want to return false and an error message. All right, if we get down to here, something was inputted. Verify that it is or is not an integer. If input indeed is not an integer, return false and error message. All right, here an integer was inputted. Verify that it is or is not within the associated range. If input indeed is not within associated range, return false and an error message. Here, a valid integer was inputted, return true, and no error message. Like I said, I'm hoping at least that you find that fairly easy to understand. Whoops. Try that again. There we go. Now what's going on here? Here we go. All right, so we've added that. Okay. All right, so let's go in, File, Save All. We have to rebuild this because this is our library file. So let's rebuild the solution. And let's make sure we don't have any errors in it. Now, when we get these errors right here like this, these are all from different files. All right. This is all from first, the earlier stuff in validation lib. I don't know what the problem is, but that shouldn't be a problem for us. All right. None of these are with what we're using right now. All right. So I'm at 13 minutes, so I'm doing just fine. Let's go back to our regular program. So let's go back into here, into our stats, and I'm going to make changes to our input and calculate output. All right. In fact, I'm going to make so many changes that, and I may, let's just do this. Let's grab everything that's in this entire routine. Everything. This is a big routine, as you can see. We're going to comment the whole darn routine out. All right. And we're going to start over, for lack of better words. All right. So I'm going to have a string, and we'll just call this error MSG. We'll set it equal to nothing. And that will be error message. Pretty obvious. All right. So let's start. Let's validate first name. In other words, cannot be empty. When we get done with that in just a moment, uh-oh. Got to see me looking for Christmas gifts for my grandkids. All right. Next, we're going to want to come in and validate the last name. Again, cannot be empty. All right. So let's start. We're validating our first name, var, and let's put in here, we'll call it OK first. OK first name. And we'll call this MSG first name. Okay. And I'm going to set that equal to, and I'm going to run out of room, so I'll go on a new line here. We're going to call this validate both. Now what is going on here? Did I not have validate both there? Validation lib. It's not finding validation library. Validation both. It's not finding it. It's finding this. Yeah. Okay, something's a little hosed here, of course. So let's take a look at this. We've got validation lib that's in there. So we should have, when we come into our program, actually we should be able to do it up here. We should be able to add a reference and validation library is in there. That's why that's coming up okay. All right, we did come into our validation library, and my guess is it's because we have these errors in it. Doggone it. My goodness. I'm going to have to stop for a second and fix these errors before I can go back and rewrite the rest of this. So I'm going to pause for just a moment, try to get rid of those errors. All right, that didn't take very long, but I did go in there and try to remove all these that I had that had the errors in them. So there's a bunch of files that are open now that of course we don't need open anymore. I think that's everything. Okay, so let me now go back to what was giving me the error in my program before, which was right here. Now I'm getting an error because I haven't finished this. All right, but I want to be able to say validation both dot, and now I want to be able to add my new we call it validation both dot validate. I thought that's what we called it. Let's go back and look. Validate required numeric and validate required string. Why isn't it finding that? And it will need txt first name dot text, and it will need first name. All right, now it's still giving me an error, so we have to figure out what the problem here is. Okay, validate required string. It says an object reference is required. So what that means is I have to go back to my validation both. I've got public bool, and I probably need the word static in there. And I'll need it there as well. So let's go back, save it again, and let's go back. I hope that when I rebuild this, it doesn't give me other errors from other files. Good gravy. And of course it did. All right, well, I'll show you how I fix these. How's that? I'll bring the file up. For some reason, it's losing. So this is fifth. Okay, it found both of them now. All right, so let's get rid of that. All right, so now going back to this, all right, so I'm not getting an error now. Okay, and I want to do the exact same thing with a last name. So the only thing I have to do is change first name to last name here. So that'll be okay, last name. And that'll be message last name. All right, and this will be last name. And this will be last name. Okay, so now, hopefully at least, I've validated both my first name and my last name. All right, now I've got to validate the height, and I have to validate the weight. All right, well, I'm going to come in here. I'll tell you what, I'm feeling good right now, so I'm going to get rid of everything that I had in here. All right, so we're down to here. So now we want to validate the height. And in a little bit, we'll also want to validate the weight. All right, so very similar to what we just did, but not exactly the same. We're going to say var, and we'll call this OK height, and we'll call this MSG height. All right, and we'll set that equal to ValidateRequiredNumeric, and that's going to be, remember there's 4 things in here, so txt height dot text and height and min height, max height. All right, now we're going to grab all of this because we just have to change the height to weight on these down here. So this will be OK weight. This will be MSG weight. Validate numeric. This will be weight. So will this. And this will be min weight and max weight. All right, so we've got all that done now. What we should be doing is after each one of these two, if we had an error, we better, so we will log any possible errors. So I'm going to say ERR error message plus equal MSG first name. All right. And we're going to have to do this every time. So here we'll log any possible errors, but we'll add last name. We'll do it here. Again, be logging errors, but it'll be MSG height. And we'll finally do it again down here, but it'll be MSG weight. All right. Now, what do we have left to do? Well, first of all, this could, if everything was valid, this is going to be empty. But it could have in there any kind of an error. In other words, it could say in there that it was a bad height, it could say it was a bad weight, it could say it was a bad first name, or it could say it was a bad last name. So if there's any errors, we basically want to show the error and then get out. So in other words, if there was or were any error or errors, show the error and return. Pretty simple. So message box dot show, and we'll just say the following error or errors were logged. And let's put in a couple \n there. All right. So plus the actual error message. And then for a title, we'll put in input error or errors. All right. And since these are actually errors, we'll say message box dot OK and message box, not information, but error. And since it was an error, we'll return. All right. So what's left? Well, if all this stuff, if everything was valid, so if we get down to here, so if we made it this far, there were no input errors. Okay. There were no input errors. So we can now calculate both the BMI and the BMI status. Let's make BMI lowercase because that is the way we called it. Okay. Oops, let's see. Okay, there we go. Now you'll notice the calculate BMI that was right there. Maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't. It's grayed out because where we were calling it before, we've removed that. So now we can say int height equals, and we don't have to do a try parse. We've already tried it. So int.parse txt height.text and int weight equals int.parse txt weight.text. Okay. And now we can say double BMI equals calculate BMI, and we'll pass in the height and the weight. And string BMI status equals calculate BMI status, and we'll pass in the BMI. All right, finally, we will output all statistics, and we will need the BMI and the BMI status. All right, and it may or may not look like it, but we probably cut the size of this function down by at least a half. All right, now I'm not done yet, but I want to try to run it and see if it runs. We got the wrong program up now, so let's get rid of that. This is 6th iteration, BMI GUI app. All right, there's no name. First name required, last name required, height required, weight required. All right, let's try putting in a first name. All right, notice the first name required message is now gone. And I should be moving back to here, but that's okay. So now to see if we get the height and the weight message, we are. Now do we still get the weight message? Yes, we do. Okay, that's all working. All right. So let's clear. And we'll exit. Now the show all isn't doing anything yet. That's what we'll have to do. But I think I'm already up over a half an hour. I am. So I'm going to stop right now. And when I come back, I'm going to make the updates to my calculate BMI and my calculate BMI status functions so that we're able to click that button that says show all and we can show everything. I'll be back with that shortly.